Okay. I guess I can tell a joke while we wait for my slides. Okay, good. Or not. Very good. Okay. So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jan Šnajder, and I'll be presenting joint work with a PhD student of mine, Mate, who's sitting over there, on AI for personality prediction. He has done all the work, so all the questions, the tough questions, should be related to him, and I take all the praise, he takes all the blame for whatever we've done. So what is this about? It's about persons, so you yourself sitting here and thinking and looking at me, hearing what I'm talking about. You have a certain kind of personality, I guess, which most of you fond of. What is personality actually? Well, personality is about individual differences in patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving. And when you think of it, it's basically pretty much what defines us. Though it's a philosophical question if there's anything left out of this picture, out of the physical, obviously. But I would claim it's not. So personality is what you are. And it turns out that personality is multifaceted. It's like a multi-faced god from the Game of Thrones. Or another take on it is it's like many windows that we have open, and then you open certain windows to certain people. So for example, when you're with your spouse, then you sort of, it's a kind of personality that you meet, which is maybe way different than what you have with your friends. And then there is social networks like Twitter, Reddit, and so on, where you then again manifest a different kind of your personality. So it's different windows on your person, on yourself. Now, the idea here is, of course, that we not only represent ourselves differently outwards, there's also differences in how we perceive the world. We might be an extrovert or an introvert, and though it's the same thing happening, the very perception might be very different for these two different kinds of personalities. Okay, now let's talk about AI. So this is an AI conference, and a very horrific view on AI, the one that we are bombarded with from Hollywood movies, looks like this one. So it's a cold, deliberate piece of mechanics that is basically trying to eliminate us. So my claim here, and I hope you agree, need not be like this. So an AI can lend us a hand, and we can do things together peacefully and hold hands like this. And maybe there can even be some synergy going on. Well, the next claim then is that in order for this to happen, we need empathy. And we've heard about empathy today. We heard that people have empathy or should have empathy, and it's not only women, it's also men, but it can also be machines, right? So the idea here is to, try to be more empathic. And what is empathy about, actually? Well, there's cognitive empathy. It's about us understanding the viewpoints and the mental states of others. But it can be taken even further. We can have emotional empathy, where we sort of engage so that we also take appropriate action with respect to other people's mental states. Well, all of these things then are the foundation for the values that we care for as a society, which is understanding other people, communication, and then at the end of the day, teamwork. Okay. So then, this is where personality profiling comes in, the field that we are now doing. Personality profiling is about discovering the individual differences in thinking, feeling, and behaving, and discovering the patterns that relate them. And there is numerous applications of personality profiling, ranging from marketing, dating, dialogue systems, and recommender systems. So talking about dialogue systems, so the idea would be to have a dialogue system that can adapt to your feelings, so that when you talk to your Alexa Echo in the evening after you're tired from the whole day of work, it's going to be a different experience. And not only that, so that the idea also is that your Amazon Echo is a different kind of personality from that of your neighbor, because it's your Alexa. It has to be different. Well, it's not only these obvious applications, it's also applications that go beyond that and help us to do early detection of the mental disorders and states in people, depression being one of the most common. Then we can also use personality profiling to detect fake news, based on the idea that fake news will be generated by AI bots, which will have an inconsistent personality. We can also do hate speech and bullying detection, and we can tackle the darkest of the darkest in psychology, the really dark disorders like the dark triad and psychopathy as one case in point. Okay, now, in order for this to happen, we need to have models. We are scientists, we work with models, and luckily, there's a whole industry in psychology dealing with personality. There is the personality psychology field of research. And they develop models, the personality models, and the two most common, and I guess some of you have heard about them, are the Big Five model, which is typically used in personality psychology, and there is also the MBTI, the Myers-Briggs type indicator model, which is more commonly known in the general public. Both of these models are used for human resources, and I think there is maybe some human resource people with us here today. So now, these models tend to be quite sophisticated. For example, the Big Five model, there is 5 traits like openness to experience and agreeableness that they model in people, but it's even more complex than that. There is also facets that interact with these traits. So it's quite complex. It's actually so complex that I have no clue about it, and we have, anyway, no time to go into detail, so let's skip this altogether. The other model that is more popular, I'd say, in general public is the MBTI model, which recognizes 16 types of personalities along the 4 dimensions, and then, for example, you can actually see that the artistic persons who are artists tend to be of the intuitive, sensing, feeling, perceiving type, right? Whereas, for example, the scientists like Richard Feynman or this guy here tend to be of more thinking and perceiving types, for example. Okay, now this is where language comes into play. We do language and try to combine language and personality. So maybe your first question might be, what does language have to do with personality? Well, it turns out it does actually a lot, and I'm going to convince you by showing you an example. So there's 2 tweets here. One of them is from Donald Trump, and the other one from Dalai Lama. Your task here, and I'm giving you 5 seconds, is to tell me which is which. The clock is ticking. Okay, the left one. Dalai Lama. The right one, Donald Trump. Okay, I guess you got that right. And what you've been doing now is profiling, and you've proven to yourself that you're very good profilers. But we knew that all along. People are good at this. So based on text, you've been able now, what you have been doing now, is you've extracted the features, and you were able to tell that this actually has more of agreeableness traits and less of neuroticism, whereas Donald Trump has less of agreeableness, at least in this tweet, and more neuroticism. And you've been doing this based on the content, on the words that have been used here, on the style of writing, notice the exclamation mark here, and also on the very content that the text is encoding. Okay, so it turns out that there is a so-called lexical hypothesis backing this up. And the lexical hypothesis is basically telling us that the important personality traits are encoded in groups' language. And furthermore, the very salient personality traits tend to be encoded as single words. So if you look at the example here, these words actually signal neuroticism, and you could tell this by just reading them out loud. So that's what we like to do. We like to analyze language to get to the types. So natural language processing is a tough thing to do because language is complex, it's vague, it's ambiguous. We knew that all along. It's also very much context dependent. It relies on a lot of common sense knowledge. Discourse and pragmatics also come into play. Okay, I can do this by heart. And the thing is that there is also jargon, there is different types of language, there is brevity involved since we analyze social media. Right? But the very good thing here is that there is style and content. There is 2 takes that we can have on the language, style and content. And we can combine them in order to analyze personalities. And that's what actually people have done before. So we are, of course, not the first one to do this. So as it comes, in talk about related work, there is the famous work of Koshinsky and Stilwell from more than 10 years ago, where they actually built a database called My Personality, consisting of 6 million profiles from Facebook, which they derived using questionnaires. And astonishing findings came out of this study. For example, they actually realized that by using personality profiling, you can predict the personality type of a person automatically better than a human being would do. So for example, if you have 70 likes of a person, you can do this better than a friend or a roommate. If you have 150 likes, you can do this better than parents and siblings. And if you have 300 likes, you can do this better than a spouse. Okay, which is actually quite astonishing. Then, building on that, Parker and others in 2015 actually realized that we can use personality profiling as an alternative to questionnaires. Since the results are going to be consistent, people can't fake it, and they also don't depend on the mood of the subject that is being analyzed. And yeah, it turns out we don't need a lot of data to tell what your personality type is. So sometimes we need as few as 25 tweets to be able to tell what your personality type is. Okay, so let's just zero in for a second on the work that we've done on Reddit. The starting point for our work were the data sets. Data sets are the weakest link in personality prediction. It turns out there is many data sets out there, but all of them have certain deficiencies, especially the feature of anonymity is something that we'd like to have, because if people are not anonymous when they interact on the internet, they are not really going to reflect entirely their personality type. So we opted for Reddit. Reddit is a social networking platform which does offer the cloak of anonymity and a set of diverse topics and a large number of users. Now, the issue here is the labels, right? Because we are training models, we need labels for supervised machine learning. And luckily, on Reddit, there is a thing called Flair. Flair is a textual tag that users can assign to themselves on certain subreddits. And on subreddits related to MBTI, the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator personality, users tend to self-label their type in the flares, like you can see in these examples here. So basically, you got the labels for free, right? And then the idea was to upscale. So starting with 122 MBTI-related subreddits, on which we found a bit more than 13,000 users, and that's them here. We then extended and took all the comments on subreddit, on Reddit, sorry, which gave us 23 million comments. Now, for each of these users, we know what her MBTI type is, but then I'm talking about different topics, right? And then we actually did quite a standard things and no deep learning here. So I guess we failed on the first step of happiness. But so what we've done is two kinds of features: the linguistic features, look features, which is basically a dictionary of words with different words that have different properties that signal different psychological states. We also use the content features, the characters of words and engrams. Then on the other side, we also use user features that we model the users, how they interact, how often they go to Reddit, and also what is their topical preferences. Okay, then we fed all of these into the model. We played a bit with different kinds of models, and then what we do, we predict the 4 MBTI types. Okay, and well, just these are the results. Basically, the model actually turns out to work quite well. This is accuracy. If we don't allow for any mismatches, our model works correct 40.8% of the time. If we allow for one off in the string of 4 MBTI types, then we basically get 81% correct. Okay, now we'd like to move on with this research, and there's many challenges that we'd like to tackle, and I'm going to briefly discuss that. So one thing that we like to do, since everybody's doing this and it's a current hype, is transfer learning, okay? We like to do transfer learning as well, though not mental, but just transfer learning. And one of the things that we do is we like to go from a large data set that we have available to smaller data sets. Another thing is to go across psychological models of personality, going from MBTI, for example, to the Big 5 model, which is a more established thing in psychology. So that's one thing. The other thing we like to do is multitask learning. Multitask learning is about learning many tasks at once in the hope that you'll excel at all the tasks at the same time. But the reason why we like to do multitask, well, the obvious reason is there is many variables besides the trait, like age and gender, that you like to take into account. But there's also the issue of biases in the data, and we like to get rid of the biases. And we see multitask learning as one way to de-bias, or at least alleviate the problem of bias, by specifically using generative adversarial networks and trying to tease apart the features that are specific to the traits and to certain variables. And in that way, sort of to remove the confounders in our analysis. We like to look into interaction. People are interacting on Reddit, so there is a lot of things about how they respond to other people and what are the other types they interact with, in the hope that we'll derive an interaction graph, which we can analyze further. And we also like to go deeper into language, because the usual approach in this field is to look at words only. We'd like to look into events, relationships, opinions, and emotions. And Roman yesterday told us about the relation between emotions and events, and there's also a relation between emotions, events, and personality types. Right? So we ideally will be able to analyze what people talk about their family members and their types, for example. And I guess the pinnacle of the research would be to come up with a vector space. The vector space model of semantics is a well-known thing in NLP. It's about words of similar semantics sharing a similar location in the vector space. Now we'd like to go with this and move this further to a personality vector space, where people with similar personality types would land in similar points in the vector space. So that ideally, Einstein and Feynman would find next to each other in the space, or maybe not, right? Depending on what actually comes out of the data. And finally, I see Virginia smiling here. We are, of course, aware of the issues of ethics. And, well, I don't have time to go into that. Let me just sketch the surface here and tell you first about the positive things. So personality profiling can help us in understanding people, which hopefully will make communication better. It would hopefully bring more well-being to the society, more knowledge, and finally discover the truth, which is the point of science. On the other hand, there's challenges. There's challenges of manipulation. I guess you all heard about Cambridge Analytica. It was about manipulating based on personality types. You all heard about Brexit, which is over now. There's the issue of information bubble, of closing people in their own set of preferences instead of allowing them to grow and develop as persons. And there's also vulnerable groups which you can profile and then maybe someone else in some other countries could target. We had some experience with that, a lot of thinking in the background, and we are aware of these issues. So our current position is that we'd like to use this technology and NLP in general to understand people better, to help people understand themselves better, to provide them with trustworthy information, to help them to acquire knowledge and communicate easier, and to shield them from hate speech, fake news, and malicious intentions, which basically means we like agreeableness, we don't like neuroticism, and we are open to experience. And yeah, we'll need your help for this. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Mr. Šnajder?
Thanks for your talk, Jan. So this Myers-Briggs model, this is especially popular outside of communities which are dominated by psychologists, I would say. And psychologists often say something like, it has not been proven that you can replicate the results when you repeat a study, and so on and so on. So when somebody comes to you and says, okay, the results which come out of the labels which we get from a Myers-Briggs model are not replicable, and this person tells you, okay, why is it actually helpful to automatically predict them? So what's the meaning of automatical predictions of Myers-Briggs labels when it's not even predictable by psychologists or in a lab environment? What's your answer?
I'm not sure that it's really the case that retakes of the test will not give you consistent results, but I think I'll forward that question to Mate. But indeed, if this is the case, it would not make really a lot of sense, right? Then it would be just us fiddling with prediction which is inconsistent. So I agree with you. In that case, I would say, okay, let's go to the big five, which is something we'd like actually to do anyway. But I'm just not sure that this is the main criticism of MBTI. There is a number of critiques directed toward MBTI, and I'm not sure that inconsistencies on retake is one of them.
Oh, okay, I can get this. So basically, it's not reliable per psychological. What psychologists say that it needs to be used as a psychometric tool. But these are only older versions. Newer versions are dealing with these issues. But what we are doing is, why we are doing this, because some dimensions are very highly correlated between Big Five and MBTI. So you can use MBTI labels that you have a lot of them everywhere on the internet, and then you can predict Big Five traits because they are highly correlated. And you have just a small amount of data, and the taking of questionnaires is lengthy, and you cannot get enough people to take them. So basically, what we are doing is using MBTI as a way to get to the Big Five labels. I'm not sure if this answer.
Absolutely answered the question. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. More questions? Yeah. And Ram, you're next.
I'm Ivica from Dalekovod. Can personality prediction models can help us to build a perfect team, or do you think to use this methodology to suggest or to help people to build big teams, good or perfect teams?
Yeah, it's for human resources management.
Yes.
So yes, that's obviously one application that I guess HR departments would be most interested in. I'm aware of research, I think, done by Google where they show that doesn't work. Maybe Mate has more insights, but I think they didn't really do this. I mean, it's not a closed thing. It's not the story's not over. They've done some experiments and they've shown that I guess personality wasn't the main variable that affects the teams, but maybe Mate, you can fill in on that.
Yeah, that they looked at it and they got that the main impact was from the empathy, actually. You know, where you're talking about without people and giving them enough space to participate in some projects. But actually, there's a whole field inside personality psychology that it's that looks at how our personality influences our teamwork, and there are a lot of good results there. So maybe because Google is not so diverse community, there are mostly engineers, there are mostly the same psychological profiles. It didn't make sense there, but in some other larger companies where there are more diverse types of jobs, then it makes sense. So I would say it depends on what companies you're talking about.
Does that answer your question? Partially.
Yes, a little bit, because my company is a construction company,
Okay.
and to make a good team is one of the crucial things to succeed in project.
I think it's quite crucial for all companies.
Yes, but this particular, because you have, I think you understand, but I think that context is very important, and it's very difficult to simulate and to make good model.
So yeah, I guess you can expect to have some support from AI in the future in constructing your construction teams.
I hope so.
Yeah, me too. Thank you.
I've got
very curious question.
Yeah,
Purely
it's
because
good. You like curious people. I mean, not what your type is.
hopefully positive is the context. I saw that you guys are using GAN, and that's curious because it's 3 days back we were really having a heated debate within our team because we work a lot with adversarial networks, and that's how we solve most of our problems. And so we have a split team within where there are some of them who won't touch GANs because they are you can't introduce noise, which is one of the key factors from a GAN for us to make the difference. And there are some who are like, no, I don't want to go to GAN, it's more of RNN and stuff. So I just wanted to understand what was your experience when you guys used GAN? Was it really interesting?
No, it's a roadmap. We have it. There is papers that have been using GANs for multitask learning to purge, purify the shared layer representations. So that ideally the shared representation would be something that deserves to be shared, whereas the task-specific representations would be specific to each individual task. So then you have this ideal correspondence between features in different layers in the task, which actually can take care of the issue of confounders. So no experience yet. There's precursory related work that we like to build on. But maybe the reason why you have this discrepancy in your team might stem from the different profiles of your team members. And you might think, rethink your team construction strategy.
Thanks. One more question there.
Okay, so I have 2 questions. My first question refers to, you mentioned mental disorder and helping discovering it. So I'm wondering, in real life, how can you use this data? Because the law is protecting the patient. So someone has suicidal thoughts or depression, and what can you, in practical life, do with it? And my second question is just for curiosity, is if someone has made a comparison between different social networks, because same people, maybe they behave differently. I don't know, on Twitter maybe they are more aggressive, that they express more anger, and Instagram is more everything is so positive and friendly.
Right. For example, Donald Trump, I'm sure he's totally different on Instagram. Yeah, so your first question, that's again an ethical dilemma, and we had a couple of them mentioned today, where you'd like to use technology to do some good in this case, but then again, you basically have issues with the privacy. And then you have to somehow to consider a trade-off here. Of course, I don't have an answer. I can tell you what the current approaches are for early detection of depression and suicidal tendencies in users online. The idea then would be that you can interact with the person and then maybe try to come to the person with messages and make the person aware that there's an issue, and then maybe the person would do some action on her own. So for example, when it comes to depression actually tends to be something that most people ignore because it's not a popular mental disorder, and it actually is something that is quite pervasive in the society, but many of the patients actually don't know that they are depressive. So the idea might be, the very first, very conservative step is just to try to reach to the person instead of actually reaching, to someone else. So yeah, I don't know. It's related to all these ethical issues. And then your other question was about. Can you remind me? Right, yeah, so we know they behave differently. I know I behave differently. So, by extension, I guess all of you do. I don't know if there's any work on this, maybe Mate knows more, but it's something that we'd like to do. We'd like to collect data from the same person on different outlets and then try to build a profile based on this. Again, ethical issues involved, what is the purpose of this, and so on. So, we are here on it's a landmine, basically, so you have to be careful.
I think we have one more question there, let's be short.
Yeah. I have a question concerning the hate speech you mentioned. I was wondering, can you detect sarcasm, or even worse, the hidden sarcasm on the people?
Right. So hate speech, even without sarcasm, is different. Is difficult. Sorry. And yeah, sarcasm adds another level to it. And I know Roman has been working on this a lot, and there's people and papers on sarcasm. So sarcasm remains a tough nut. There is certain kinds of sarcasm, the well-behaved ones, which we can tackle. The rest requires too much of common sense knowledge, contextual knowledge, basically. So yeah, not really. There's also the issue of satire, right, when it comes to hate speech. And again, a fine line is always in ethics, it's always a fine line, otherwise there is no ethical issues between satire and hate speech. And yes, now we actually applied yesterday for a hate speech detection project. So if we get to do this, then we'll try to tackle these issues to a certain extent.